Hello, welcome back. I'm Ken. I'm visiting with Mike. Mike, I'm beginning to grasp the idea that certain things have to be true before you get very far into the process of creating change in an organization, meaningful improvement. Or even certain things have to be true before you begin the process. Take us from
Yeah,
there.
I agree. I guess the primordial one would be the mindset of the leader, because the value that the individual espouses will color the style of management, the interactions, and people on the floor will interpret their behavior whichever way it leads.
And when you refer to on the floor, you mean the people who are doing the work, the production floor in a manufacturing facility.
Yeah, or even in an office or in a church or you name it, in a family. Um, so that's really the starting point. So the first thing I would say to people is, and I asked that different times in industry, I said, if you're in a different job, what would be the key things that you would carry with you? You know, what, and I don't mean your books and a picture of the family or your wife and the kids and whatever. I meant more in terms of what are the values, the principles that you would hold, that you would apply. And that's different from the actions and the techniques that different people would use. Um, but right now we've been using Nehemiah as an example. But if we move to different people like Nissan and Gosen, his approach, the phases were the same, the values were the same, but the techniques were totally different. So you have to modify or to choose a mode of operation that will fit the situation. Um, So you have to understand probably three things. One is the situation, like in Nehemiah's case, is what's the state of the wall? The environment, in other words, we're going back to Nehemiah. If you look at the people that are there, well, some of them have been there over generations, but some others were in exile. So it's what, been 150 years since the first number of people were exiled to Babylon. So 150 years is a long time, okay? And the people that are there then probably don't know and understand what all that was. They accept the situation the way it is. That's all they know. In my case, for example, I know a little bit about World War II because my parents lived through it and I heard the stories. But my grandchildren are totally oblivious. So, it doesn't take very long for the people to adapt to their current situation, not necessarily live in the way that they used to. It's a challenge. And you also have to understand human behavior, human nature. Uh, One of the things that I find fascinating is how people are very, very easily influenced in a certain behavior. And there's all kinds of studies about that. One of them that I like is the story about people in Aberdeen. They're in Texas. It's hot. It's a miserable day. And they say, well, let's do something. Let's go out and have dinner somewhere. And so they've got a long ride in a car. It's hot. The meal is lousy. Then they go back. And then when they go back, then the author suddenly realizes that nobody wanted to make the trip. But because they thought everybody else wanted to, they said, okay, I'll go along. So that's one example. Another example is the situation that one researcher did is have students decide which was shorter or what's longer in terms of a stick or something of that sort, of a bar of some sort. And the people in the class, all but one, had been told, choose the wrong one, choose this one, okay? And then they brought in the last person, and the last person comes in and he hears the choice of the other people, and guess what? Even though it's quite obvious that that's the wrong answer, he goes along with the answer of the group. So it's peer pressure and conformity and fitting in is very much something that the leader has to understand to be able to break the cycle. So those are probably the key things that you need to have to be effective. Otherwise, you'll learn the hard way kind of thing.
Let's review, please. You said situation,
Yes,
environment.
yes.
What's the third one? Is it human nature?
Human nature.
There we go. I will put that in the notes for this visit. Go ahead, please.
So it's important to do that. So like what we talked about the Nehemiah. Well, he had to understand that some of the people had been in Jerusalem through the exile. Some had just come back from the exile. Some had come back with Ezra 50 years before. So you've got a mixture of people, but very few understand what really is at stake other than the situation that they're in. So then, given that, then how did you handle that? You're the leader, so you could say, okay, you guys ship up. Let's fix it. Okay, that's typically what would happen is what the dickens are you guys doing? And, this is a mess and fix it, Another one could have been, could have asked the question, how are we doing? Yeah, but he knew the answer to that. Or he could have rationalized and say, well, it could be worse. So the issue then is to draw a picture of what the situation is, that the situation that everybody understands. And again, the different cases that I suggested have different approaches. In the case of Nehemiah, he says he draws all the leaders of the people in Jerusalem, and he says, you see the situation that we're in. So he's acknowledging the situation. He's taking ownership also and saying we, not you, and is trying to drive them into say, okay, yeah, we admit it's not a good situation. But it doesn't stop there. Then he gives some hope. You have to have somehow, like with Moses, the prospect of the promised land, the land of milk and honey. What is the benefit for the people that it would want to change? Because change usually means that you have to give up something. So how does he do that? He says, well, God's hands was in it, kind of thing. And also that the king is all behind it and is giving us resources or whatever. So the point is that we've got people who count who are supporting our effort, who want us to succeed. And then he doesn't say, okay, go and do it. The book says the response was they put their in their hands. In other words, they decided to say, okay, we'll go and do it. Okay, so you have to have commitment by the people. So the drawing of the picture and eliciting a response from the people who will have to do the work. For instance, when we look at Bratton in New York City, first he went around with the policemen in the police cars and saw what it was, but then he decided that he would have a survey made, but not by him, but by the policemen. So he chose a group of people, I think it was about 300 policemen, to go out and interview and to make an assessment of what are the kinds of things to be done. So he's moving the thing from this is what I think from this is what you guys know we need to do. So that's a big shift in an approach. Gosen with Nissan took a totally different approach. First, he respected that people have responsibilities, are people in position of authority, and he's not going to dilute that. But what he did, he set up some teams by discipline to identify the areas that need to be fixed that will have a major financial impact. So people in sales, people in purchasing, people in production, people in research and development, all kinds of things like that. And what he did, he said, okay, you guys tell the people who are in charge of those functions what you found and what you recommend. And then he turned to the people in authority and he said, okay, now that you guys have this, what are you going to do about it? Again, he didn't take away their responsibility. It was their decision, their doing, their performance. So you have to have that ownership at the grassroots level. The risk as a consultant that I have when you go into a new situation is kind of a resentment of the newcomer. Somebody's coming in, and different people have told me, hey, I've been in this business for 10 years. What do you know about this business? Okay. In other words, what is it that you know that we don't know, kind of thing? If anything, we know more than you do, therefore, what can you do? Another time, I went into a situation where the organization had been decimated by another consulting group. They had it was an accounting firm, and their forte was to cut cost by the numbers. So had that role, but none of the systems, not the way they were doing things. So it was a mess, and people are saying, "Oh boy, here comes another consultant. Who's going to lose their job now?" So you have all of those kinds of things that are key to be able to motivate people to change. In my case, one example that I remember is in Connecticut. We had a group of our group of people already there, but somehow things were stalled. So I went up there, and there was one business that the company wanted to sell. So they asked, the president asked, is there anything we can do to make that attractive? So I said, well, I'll go down to the plant and talk to people. So I went down to the plant and set up a meeting with all of the people associated with that process. And when I got there and everybody was there in the meeting room, the comment was, what are you going to do? Not me. I said, not me, you. I'm not going to do anything. But the point is there's opportunities, and let's do it. And the response was, yeah, we've been there before and nobody listens. So I said, well, take one specific thing. I cannot talk about generalities. Let's take a specific. And they said, well, we need a forklift because We have one forklift for the plant, and when we need it, it's at the other end of the plant, and then we lose the time, and then, this and that. And anyway, so I said, okay, let's put something together that management understands. Let's put down the costs and the benefit of having the forklift. So we did that. And I took a flip chart and write these things down as they were saying them. And then I turned to the people and say, okay, here's your thing. You write it up, send it to the plant manager, and let's see what happens. Okay, so then I left there. I went to the plant manager and said, hey, this is coming to you. Don't sit on it, pass it on to the president. And then I went to the president and say, hey, this is coming. It's good. Let's not dilly-dally. Let's do it. Anyway, a week later, the forklift truck shows up. Beautiful yellow truck. So a few days later, I get a phone call, another phone call. Somebody gives me the message. The plant manager is called and said he wants to talk to you. So my reaction was, which toes did I step on? Whose toes was it that I stepped on? So I go over there and says, well, the people are complaining. Okay, what for? Well, you're working with that group, and they want to do that too. So, so there's a couple of stories or element to that is if you try to change the whole thing, at least that's my own bias. If you try to tackle the whole plant as an example, in this case, it's very difficult. It's impossible to move a mass of people. Like for instance, with Bratton, 40,000 policemen in New York City. Well, that's the population of a small city kind of thing. So how do you get access to a mass of people? And the best approach for me has always been set an example. And then not only do you have that example, but then the leadership, the plant manager and the president have to rah the results so that everybody says, hey, I want some of those kudos too. So that's one of the things. The second thing that's always real, and that's in Nehemiah and the beginning of the chapter 2, verse 9. He talks about the governors of the provinces beyond the river were displeased, so they mocked and despised. And then in chapter 4, which is a little bit later in the text, as they see the progress, the same people became furious and angry and ridicule. That's 4:1 and 4:3. And as the wall starts to be built up, in 11 it says, the enemy said they will not know until we kill them. So in other words, now the intensity of the opposition builds up as time goes on and as results start to accumulate. And that was all directed to the people in general. And then in chapter 6, verse 2, then it stops being from the people in general, but personal. It's directed towards Nehemiah. And they say, come and let us meet together. But he knew that what they were planning to do is to harm him. So he wasn't any hurry to go and talk to them. And what is there to negotiate? Nothing, it's so, and then in verse 12 in chapter 6, you have not only the external, but also the internal people who will undermine your efforts. And it talks about an individual who had been hired by the opposition to come and compromise Nehemiah. So the point is that you have that kind of opposition also that you have pretty much to be aware and scan and respond to in the appropriate way to be able to continue the work. So that it's a multifaceted kind of process, and you've got to be, as you go and do different steps, be aware of all the other things that are moving at the same time.
We're almost out of time. This is gold. This is wonderful, Mike. Thank you. Is there anything you'd like to say kind of to wrap up or in conclusion?
Well, the conclusion would be maybe two things. One, separate from what I'm saying, what I'm talking about, I encourage everybody to read Nehemiah and to be able to see and interpret what he's saying or what he's doing. Because the important thing for anybody is not only just to hear what I have to say, but to develop the skills to be able to see and understand and to put things in a way that they can be transferred in different situations. If it's been successful, there's something to be learned. Even if something fails, there's something to be learned. So that would be the one thing. The second thing is that you cannot minimize the level of opposition. And different places, that ugly face showed up in ways that I could never imagine. One time I was in Detroit at the hotel. We were staying there while we were working with the plant people, and the president was with me, and I was with him. And in the morning, I meet him for breakfast, and he's furious. I said, "What's bugging you?" He says, "You'll never believe what they did. They sent a prostitute to my room trying to compromise me." My reaction is, I can't believe it. I believe it now because I know that the person he followed was a womanizer. So they tried to say, okay, that guy like that kind of stuff, we'll try to do the same thing for this guy, and then we'll control him. And he was furious because he wasn't going to have any part of it, kind of thing. So you've got to be aware of opposition as much as being intentional as to what you're doing and making sure that you get things addressed.
Maybe in another visit, we could explore some of the ways to go about not only taking opposition seriously, but handling it and taking the appropriate response. We've got to finish here. Thank you. This is fantastic. Look forward to our next visit.
Will do. Good way. Thank you.